He always believed my quiet meant loyalty, that my habit of swallowing my words was some kind of devotion. From the beginning of his affair with her, the signs were obvious. She appeared in our lives like a shadow, first as a charming guest at our parties, then as his trusted advisor, and finally as something much more overt. Every opportunity he had once reserved for me drifted into her hands as if by some unspoken agreement. The project I had nurtured for 3 years, the expansion plan I had drafted on countless sleepless nights, even the gallery show he'd once promised to fund for me, one by one he transferred them to her. At dinner he would speak about her ideas as if they were revelations, never acknowledging that they had been mine, sketched on napkins and shared in whispers long before she arrived. He thought I would sit there and smile, and for a time, I did. Silence became my camouflage. While they toasted each other across our dining table, I took mental notes. I learned how she operated, how he enabled her. I noted every detail with the precision of someone filing evidence. Dates, amounts, promises broken, contacts stolen. I stored it all on a small encrypted drive hidden in the lining of an old purse she would never think to touch. My smile at those dinners was not consent, it was strategy. Each betrayal felt like a pebble dropped into a glass jar somewhere inside me. The sound was soft at first, almost imperceptible, but over time the jar filled and the pebbles became stones, heavy and sharp. I could feel their weight even in my sleep. I began rehearsing words in the bathroom mirror late at night, telling my reflection the things I wished I could tell him. But every morning I swallowed them down. Not because I was afraid, though a part of me was, but because I understood that nothing I said would change him. He needed to believe that I would endure. I needed him to believe it too, until the moment I stopped. I moved through the house like a ghost, making preparations he never noticed. While he was in meetings or traveling with her, I reorganized my finances, opened new accounts, transferred small sums he wouldn't miss. I called lawyers under false names and learned what was legally mine. I created backups of every email and contract that showed how he had shifted my opportunities to her. I even learned about their secret investments, the shell companies he used to move money, the debts she carried that he had quietly assumed. Knowledge was my shield, and every fact I collected was another layer of protection. When he finally handed over my last chance, my equity in the company I had helped him build, I felt something inside me click. Not pain, not even anger, just a quiet certainty. He had given away not just my work but the last illusion that I mattered to him beyond convenience. That night I sat at my desk long after he went to bed, staring at a blank page. I thought about writing a long letter, spilling every thought and wound, but the words felt heavy and useless. Instead, I wrote 3 short sentences, no accusations, no pleas. It was a goodbye disguised as a note. I folded the paper once and placed it on the marble kitchen counter where he liked to leave his watch. Then I moved through the house, room by room, stripping away the pieces of myself I had left behind. My closet emptied into suitcases stacked by the back door. My studio walls, once covered with sketches, went bare. In my office I removed the framed photographs one by one, leaving only faint rectangles on the walls. By the time the first light touched the windows, the house no longer belonged to me. I left my wedding ring in a small dish by the sink, next to a coffee cup he had left out the night before. It felt like setting down a weight I had carried too long. Outside, the street was quiet, slick with rain. I loaded my suitcases into a waiting car and watched the house recede through the rear window as we pulled away. There was no dramatic confrontation, no shouting. Just the sound of tires on wet pavement and my own breath coming faster than I expected. As the city blurred past, I thought of all the years I had given him, all the silences he had mistaken for permission. It struck me then that my silence was not weakness but a decision, one I had been making piece by piece until this moment. He would wake to find not just a note but an absence so complete it would echo in every corner of his life. My phone was already disconnected. The accounts we had shared were empty of me. Even my social media had vanished. By the time he realized I was gone, I would be somewhere he couldn't reach, someone he no longer knew. I closed my eyes and leaned back against the seat, feeling a strange calm settle over me. It wasn't triumph or relief, not yet. It was the quiet before a storm, the moment when you step off the edge of a cliff and feel nothing but air beneath you. I thought of the pebbles in the jar inside me and realized that by leaving I had finally set them down. The sound they made as they fell, silent, invisible, was the only farewell he would get. I didn't know what would happen to him next. I didn't know if his empire would crumble or if she would betray him the way he had betrayed me. I didn't even know if I cared. All I knew was that I had vanished for good, and that somewhere, when he found the note in the empty closets, he would feel the weight of his choices. For the first time in years, I felt the beginnings of a life that belonged only to me. I disappeared from his city like mist at dawn. The first days were a blur of logistics. New apartment, new phone, new bank accounts, but beneath that practical rush there was a current of disbelief. For so long I had imagined leaving that when it actually happened, my body needed time to catch up to my decision. In a quiet coastal town 3 hours away, I rented a small house with cracked white shutters and a view of the sea. It smelled of salt and pine resin, and at night the waves drummed against the rocks like a heartbeat. No one there knew my name. That anonymity felt like oxygen after years of suffocating in his shadow. Each morning I woke before sunrise and ran along the shore until my lungs burned and the sky turned pink. The routine was cleansing, almost ritualistic, and with every mile I felt the weight of him loosen. My hair grew back to its natural color. I wore clothes he would never have chosen for me. Even my voice, when I spoke to shopkeepers or neighbors, sounded different, lighter, freer, as if I'd borrowed it from another woman. In the evenings I sat at my small kitchen table and built the skeleton of a new business from the contacts and skills I had quietly collected while living with him. It started as a consultancy, anonymous and online, but within weeks clients from our old circles began to recognize my work and reach out privately. They whispered that they'd always admired me, that they had known I was the real strategist behind the projects he claimed as his own. Their messages were both validation and fuel. Money began to flow in. Not the kind of ostentatious wealth he flaunted, but enough to build a foundation that belonged entirely to me. For the first time, every dollar in my account had my name on it and no strings attached. I rented a small co-working space with high ceilings and sunlight that poured through wide windows. There I drafted proposals, negotiated deals, and watched my new identity take shape on the screen in front of me. Each email I sent felt like a brick in the house I was building. Solid and deliberate. Meanwhile, news about him began to trickle into my life like a distant radio signal. I didn't seek it out. Friends forwarded articles, ex-colleagues sent cryptic messages, even strangers left comments under my posts hinting at trouble. He and his mistress had launched the expansion plan he had once promised to me, but without my oversight it began to buckle. Deadlines slipped. Investors grew restless. Whispers about mismanaged funds circulated in trade publications. A quiet thrill ran through me each time I read a headline, but it wasn't joy exactly, more like the confirmation of a prediction I had long ago scribbled in the margins of my mind. At night, when the sea roared against the rocks, I thought of the precautions I had taken before leaving. The anonymous email I had sent to a regulatory office with details about the shell companies. The backups of contracts I had secured. I hadn't done it to destroy him but to protect myself from the moment he would inevitably try to erase me financially. Now those seeds were sprouting, each new inquiry another sign that the net was tightening around him, not me. One evening, just as the sun dipped low enough to paint the water in molten copper, my phone buzzed with a voicemail notification. The number was unfamiliar but my gut recognized it instantly. I hesitated before pressing play. His voice came through in fragments, my name spoken twice, a pause heavy with shame, then an apology. He said he had chosen wrong, that everything was falling apart, that he couldn't sleep without hearing my voice. He begged for a chance to explain. I deleted the message before it ended. My thumb hovered over the screen for a long time afterward, but there was no ache, no temptation, only a quiet sense of closing a door that should never have been left ajar. The next day I woke to an email from a former investor, someone who had once been seated at our dining table while he bragged about his empire. The investor wanted to hire me for a major project, one that had originally been mine before he handed it to his mistress. The irony was sharp and satisfying. We signed the contract within a week. Suddenly my small consultancy had the backing of a name that opened doors faster than any introduction he could ever arrange. My calendar filled with meetings, my bank account with deposits. The life he had denied me was blooming, not in his world but in mine, on my terms. Sometimes, in quieter moments, I wondered what he pictured when he thought of me now. Did he imagine me lost and bitter, nursing my wounds in some dingy apartment? Did he know I had built something larger than the future he tried to steal? There was a strange power in knowing he couldn't find me, that his calls went unanswered, that his apologies drifted into a void. My silence was not a wall but an entire landscape he could no longer cross. Weeks turned into months, and with each passing one the distance between us grew less about geography and more about identity. I was no longer the woman who rehearsed speeches in the bathroom mirror. I was someone who acted, who decided, who built. The sea became my metronome, steady and vast, teaching me patience. Sometimes at night I would stand on the balcony of my small house, breathing the salt air, and feel almost grateful for the years of silence that had honed me into a blade sharp enough to cut free. Yet beneath the calm surface there was still a current of anticipation. I knew he wasn't done reaching out. Men like him rarely accept the finality of someone else's choice. His empire was crumbling, the mistress who had once been his prize was rumored to be cooperating with investigators, and his name was beginning to appear in the business pages alongside words like fraud and audit. All of it was unfolding without a single push from me. My only weapon had been withdrawal, and it was working better than any confrontation ever could. On the day my company officially launched under my real name, not the anonymous shell I had used to build it, I received a delivery at the co-working space. No return address, just a plain envelope inside a box. The handwriting on the note was unmistakably his. He had found a way to send a message even though he no longer knew my phone number. My hands didn't shake as I tore it open. It was only a few lines, full of apologies and nostalgia, asking me to meet him. I folded the paper and dropped it into the trash without reading further. Then I turned back to my desk and continued drafting a proposal for a new client. By the time the sun set that evening, my inbox held 3 more inquiries, each one a step further into the life I had chosen. Outside, the sea rolled on, indifferent and endless. Inside, I felt something shift, a quiet certainty that his collapse was no longer my story. It was just background noise to the one I was writing for myself. The rumors that had once been whispers became headlines, and the headlines became investigations. His name, once synonymous with power, began to appear beside words like fraud, breach of contract, and embezzlement. The mistress who had been his shining prize stopped showing up at his side in photographs. Instead, she appeared leaving a courthouse, sunglasses covering her face, her lawyer shielding her from reporters. Word reached me through an old colleague that she had turned over evidence to save herself. He had always thought betrayal was a weakness in other people, never imagining it could happen to him. Now the empire he had built on arrogance and borrowed loyalty was collapsing, brick by brick, and all of it without a single move from me. I stayed far from the noise. My days were full of work and light, of meetings that started with respect rather than condescension, of evenings spent by the sea. The consultancy had grown into something bigger than I had dared to imagine. My name was appearing in places that had once ignored me, attached to articles praising my strategy, my resilience, my quiet comeback. I didn't correct them. They didn't know that this wasn't a comeback but a beginning. In the middle of this new life, his downfall reached me only in fragments, like static from a distant station. Yet the fragments told a vivid story. He had lost his penthouse. The cars had been seized. Friends he once entertained on yachts stopped returning his calls. When creditors came knocking, he moved into a furnished apartment on the edge of the city. A mutual acquaintance sent me a photo once, grainy, taken from across a street, showing him standing outside a grocery store with a paper bag, looking smaller somehow, as if the world had shrunk him down. I didn't save the photo. But the messages kept coming. He found ways to slip letters into places he thought I might still be. Emails sent to old accounts. Notes left at former addresses. Each one was a variation of the same plea. He was sorry, he had chosen wrong, he needed me. The words that had cost me years of silence now cost him nothing, and I had no interest in collecting them. I let every message go unanswered. My silence became an ocean between us, wider and deeper than any apology could cross. According to another mutual friend, he began pacing at night, muttering my name. He stopped showing up to meetings, stopped eating, sat for hours staring at a dead phone. The mistress he had given everything to had already fled, leaving behind nothing but subpoenas and unpaid bills. His legal team thinned as his funds ran dry. Each day brought another blow, and without my steadying presence he spiraled further. It wasn't vengeance, though people assumed it was. It was simply what happened when the scaffolding he had stolen from others finally came down. 2 years after the morning I left, my company was invited to sponsor a major conference in the city we had once called home. I hesitated before accepting, but in the end I went, not for him but for me, for the chance to stand on a stage as myself, under my own name. The hotel was gleaming, all glass and steel, filled with people who had once known me only as his quiet partner. Now they knew me as the keynote speaker. I arrived in a black dress that didn't apologize for taking up space. My hair was pinned back. My hands were steady. Just before my speech, as I stood behind the curtain waiting for my cue, a ripple of commotion passed through the lobby outside. Someone whispered my name. I glanced over and saw him at the edge of the crowd. For a second I didn't recognize him. He was thinner, his hair streaked with gray, his suit hanging off his frame like a borrowed costume. The confidence that had once filled every movement was gone. He reached out as if to wave, but his hand shook. Security stepped forward, sensing the tension. He tried to speak my name but it came out hoarse, a whisper drowned by the noise of the crowd. Our eyes met for the briefest moment. In them I saw not the man who had dismissed me, not the conqueror of boardrooms, but someone hollowed out by the weight of his own choices. Then his knees buckled. He collapsed right there on the marble floor, a soundless fall that nonetheless drew gasps from the onlookers. Cameras clicked, phones rose to capture the scene. People rushed toward him. I stayed where I was, just beyond the curtain, my microphone in hand. For a moment time slowed. I remembered the note on the marble kitchen counter, the suitcases by the door, the sound of rain on the street the morning I left. This was not the ending I had ever pictured, yet it felt inevitable, as if all the roads he had taken had been leading here. He had collapsed not from any single blow but from accumulation, arrogance, betrayal, loss, and finally, silence. My silence. The stage manager touched my elbow. "You're on," she whispered. I walked out into the lights as the murmur from the lobby faded behind me. The room was full of faces turned toward me, waiting. I began my speech exactly as I had written it, my voice calm and clear. It was about resilience, about reclaiming your own narrative, about how silence can be an act of power. I didn't mention him once. I didn't need to. His story was unfolding in the next room, audible only as a distant echo of sirens and whispers. As I spoke, something inside me shifted. I realized I wasn't angry anymore, not even triumphant. I was simply free. The life I had built since vanishing wasn't an answer to his cruelty but a testament to my own endurance. Standing there under the lights, I saw the arc of my own story not as revenge but as escape, as creation, as survival. The audience rose to their feet at the end, their applause a steady roar that washed over me like the sea. When I stepped off the stage, someone handed me a phone with news from the lobby. He had been taken away, conscious but pale, muttering incoherently. I thanked them and returned the phone. Outside, the city buzzed, oblivious. Inside, I gathered my notes and walked to the window, watching the sun fall between the skyscrapers. For the first time in years, I felt no shadow at my back. Whatever happened to him now was his alone. My story had moved on, and I intended to keep walking forward, one deliberate step at a time, into a life entirely my own.